Fun is the goal.
Fun is the goal. All right. And I'm realizing, and you poured your BCAAs, we didn't make any tea today.
Yeah. Not
No,
brought to you
no.
by Nerdy Girl Tea.
Today we are sponsored by water, which is probably good on the gym podcast too. All right. So today we are talking, I don't know, we're talking some gym stuff. I know there's some theory, but like philosophical stuff that we're going to try to get into on this side of things. But I think we first just want to update with what's been going on within our space. So, our gym, our members this week are at the end of a lifting training cycle. For the last 6 weeks, we've been doing a squat strength cycle, which has been super fun. I think our community really enjoys the lifting. So it's always fun when we get to do a strength cycle. But what's been different about this kind of phase of training that we're in is the cycles are going to be a little shorter, which is also kind of newer for me. The A lot of the information we're getting on the back end through our HWPO affiliate stuff is that we're instead of doing one long training cycle, we're kind of splitting that in half. So that's where we're at. So we're going to be squatting this week a lot. And then the end of the week, we are maxing our back squats. So it's raised some interesting conversation and communication amongst us as coaches, but also kind of getting that information to our members. So I don't know. Yeah. Do you have anything to share with that? You've been on the floor a little more in the last few weeks and
No, not really. It's been fun to watch. I remember at the start of this cycle, we were coming off of Murph. So there was a level of, we hadn't really been under much heavyweight. I remember you talking about that piece of that and kind of watching people,
the open. We were coming off the open.
the open.
Yes.
My bad. Murph's coming up. But we talked about a little bit about how um, the strength, it was exciting to get back into the strength stuff because the open seemed to have taken it out of him. So, and that first check in was not quite what you was expecting. So it's been fun to watch the strength come back through the cycle and some folks getting a little deeper in their squats and folks really just kind of moving the needle a little bit on what they're doing and that sort of stuff. That's where some of the philosophical stuff comes in today too. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation.
No, it was interesting. Like you said, we were coming out of the open and we weren't not lifting going into the open, but you could definitely see the programming shift and change to more more cardio, more just doing dumbbells, or moving in workouts rather than trying to build anything. And that we have a couple of transition weeks from the open into the start of this cycle. And the first week was doing testing. It's a testing week, but really the only testing of the cycle was our max back squat. And God, like there's two extremes were happening where we did have some athletes that seemed to really thrive from stepping away from competing for a while. And they hit PRs and numbers, pretty significantly. I think we had a couple that hit maybe like a 10 to 15 pound PR, which was really cool to watch them do that. And then we had other half, I would say, missed it by equally as much. So it wasn't even like we were 5 to 10 pounds off our old number. We were, 15, 20, 25 pounds for some of our like really heavy lifters. And so it was an interesting notice as a coach. And, we're fresh affiliate owners too. So we're just entering our second year. And so, yeah, it was interesting to watch. And then we had, week one went how it went. And then week two, we're kind of in this place where most of the members that kind of missed their lifts in that first week have a lot of experience in lifting. And so let's, you know, base off the number that we hit for testing week. But at the same time, if we start getting back under some weight, like you may just need to get back in a rhythm and a groove. And it was the second week was just as challenging as the first week. But by the time we hit that third week of the cycle, it felt like everyone was just comfortable again. You could see kind of collectively people more settled into what they're doing. Our heavier lifters were getting able to do the percentage work off of their old max. And so 3 went really well. Week 4 was great. Last week was week 5, and we were hitting 92% with not a lot of problems and not a lot of struggle, which was really cool. So I'm excited to see what we do this week because this will be our retest. And I think everything's trending in the right direction for that to feel pretty comfortable. So we'll see where we go.
I think it's important to as we get into this conversation too, is like the heavy lifting. When you talk heavy, heavy's relative.
Yeah.
It's not to lose sight of the idea that heavy is heavy for you and what those edges are. For somebody, it might be 55 pounds versus a couple hundred for the guy that's working out across from him. But
Well, and that's
yeah,
I think, a great start for our conversation. We released, I think within our list of episodes, we have a max day and kind of max day and mindset, I think was the name of the episode. That should actually be our second episode on here. But we really, when we recorded that, you and I didn't get to have a conversation. So this will be fun today. It was something that I wanted to record for our members going into actually the start of this training cycle. And it's nice to put out there. And I did it in a way to where we could work it into, what we're doing here with refining the 33. But it's I'm biased because I really enjoy the lifting and the wall balls, but it is, as I've gotten into coaching, it is so psychological for a lot of people. And there's a lot of different ways that we can you know, uh, approach the heavy lifting. What does it mean to actually max, which I think is a conversation we'll get into here. But it is so different and so unique for each person. And we do tend to use slightly different language within our gym space of helping people find edges. And we'll get into kind of what those edges can be. But it's seeing or hearing heavy lifts are also, I would say, for a population of person or what keeps them out of CrossFit, keep them out of the CrossFit space because it's has a reputation for just being recklessly lifting a lot of heavy load really fast. And that's not necessarily the case. So when you think, or when you see one rep back days, or again, kind of from that coach's lens of seeing it on the schedule now, like where did your brain go and what are the what's at the top of the list for you?
well, this will lead us. Yeah, the topic this week is kind of like how do we measure that for folks, and it's not just about what that number is. I know it's been interesting for me to get on the floor. I don't think we've talked about my story as far as how and I started CrossFit when Dr. Devon started CrossFit. She took a different path with it, got a little more intense about it. That her college athleteness came out of her. But my history and background with this sort of stuff is in her college athlete days. So there was a lot of training and a lot of that sort of stuff. And we've always kind of nerded out over movement patterns and making sure they're right and making sure they're moving well. And how do we fine tune your strength as an athlete as you were trying to get recruited to play softball and through that process and all of the stuff that went into learning that and planning that and watching that progress and seeing what progress looked like for you as an athlete. So it's been interesting to be back on the floor here now for a while and start working with athletes again and have a lot of that stuff flow back and then watching the different athletes in the gym move and figuring out like, yeah, that was a great lift. And what is the next step in that? Is it a little more weight? Is it better form? Is it like, what do we need to tweak? And kind of having the thoughts go through my brain as far as watching people and figuring out, all right, so this is great. Like what does progression look like? What do results look like? What does ultimately the methodology for CrossFit is it's measurable. And how do we measure it? And how do we make sure that There are some folks that love coming in the gym and just moving their bodies today. And that's fantastic if that's your goal. That's most people's goal probably. But at the same time, we still have to work through the programming and stuff and make sure that like our goal is like you get stronger today. You know, again, stronger is relative, but how do we move the needle forward a little bit every day? How do we refine what we're doing in the gym so that even if your goal is to come in and move today, we as coaches and as a coaching staff are still kind of pushing things forward a little bit, not from a hey, you have to do more, but hey, how do we tweak what's going on? How to or hey, great job on your lift today. That looks fantastic. We had one in the gym this morning that we've been working on getting to be a little less timid. And my goal for her has been I've been working with her pretty closely in the morning class. Just let's get her under a little bit of weight. I've been watching her lift now for the 3, 4 weeks I've been in the gym. And I've been around since she's been in the gym and just kind of watching her kind of move through things. So it's been fun to challenge her a little bit and say, all right, what if we put another 2.5 on each side? What does that feel like? Oh, that's okay. Well, let's go a little farther. And you're squatting to target because your knees, when you started this, your knees were sore. And let's keep you safe, but also can we get you a little deeper? And it's been neat to watch that progress. And that's not something I think she would have asked for herself. She's happy to be here and be a part of the community and moving her body every day. But I think finding that for each of the athletes, and they obviously get some determination in that and what their goals are. But how do we as coaches continue to refine our process and our expectations and our eyes as far as what we can do to help them reach those goals and also keeping them moving forward. So that's been fun to sort of watch all that unfold. So when we get into a heavy day, a max day, it really is less about the machismo of it and more about, all right, so let's set the bar for the next round of work because everything we're doing right now is percentage work. And today they did 40, today they did 40% of their max, which is pretty light for them. They moved real through it really well. But the goal is, I think you said it in class, it's pretty squats. Let's
Ready.
make sure the form is right, make sure the depth is right, make sure all the mechanics are right. Because we're gonna get heavy on Friday, and let's see what this looks like and make sure everything's in line first. So that I think that's part of it is the heavy days are really just about setting the bar to what the next round of percentage work looks like, regardless of what that is. Um, yeah, it's been fun to do.
I think there's a misconception around getting stronger always being about pushing more weight. Our history within some of the programming, the gym that I came up through, our head coach is actually still my coach from a distance, Cameron. He did all the programming for the gym. And it was, you saw the variance in what we were doing. And we kind of, I'm sure from his end, right, like intentional cycles of things. But it wasn't always lift heavy always. It was, we would come in and today would be a build to a heavy 2 or a heavy 3, or it might even be a heavy single. And then, a few times a year, we would see on the schedule that we were maxing certain lifts. So that's some language and terminology that we see a lot in general. And that was my experience coming up through CrossFit, right? Was through that one kind of course of programming. And I know that he dabbled with some different programs over the years and, tried different things. And I remember going through a phase where we were following some sort of programming and I think, did it through a couple of training cycles and then that one kind of phased out and a new one phased in and kind of some of that play. And so when we opened, I originally started doing the programming because I knew we didn't know who we were going to attract, who was going to end up in our space. And I like to have control over things. That probably will shock very many people listening to this. And so it was a way that we could kind of like slowly integrate new movements, but we could kind of keep a hold on how much we were lifting, how heavy we were getting, XYZ. And then we hit a point where I we personally had some experience with HWPO through their initial, I think it was their initial launch of their flagship program. And so I was between gyms, I wasn't working out anywhere and just needed something to kind of fill that gap. And we had a really great experience with following. program and kind of working through some training cycles. And I would say at the time it was probably it was neat to be able to see the consistency, right? And showing up and intentionally hitting lifts and percentage work and those sorts of things. And it was amazing. We had a conversation early on. It was like, man, we're only ever lifting at like 40, 45, 50, 55%, right? Most of that cycle. And then you could see that things kind of ramp up. But it was an interesting personal experience being there. And then when the tests and the retests come back around, you're like, oh, I'm getting stronger. I haven't touched anywhere near this weight in weeks. And so that was a cool kind of like separate experience of feeling that build. So when we decided to start following, we went back and forth quite a bit of like, do we follow a program? Do we not follow a program? I've had experience of coaching elsewhere through some programs that I felt were too much volume. It was too aggressive. I told you we're going to fidget, where it was too much. And that's, right, wrong, or indifferent. It felt like people were kind of constantly wrecked, sore. I experienced that programming. This is probably not the day to tell this story, but experiencing that, my healthiest, wrecked me. And so that was trying to think about what we wanted to do for our community was like, all right, like, how do we know that what we're doing is the right thing for our people? And so the training cycles have been fun, and it's a neat way to approach it and give people some targeted focus for, whatever length of time. And it does allow us to kind of deep dive into a couple areas and put the one like challenge, I guess you would say, is other things get set aside, right? Like if we're focused on squats for 6 weeks, we're not getting as much of XYZ in. But we really get to just show up. And you mentioned the measurable aspect of progress within CrossFit. And the other piece of that we haven't really talked about is, yeah, it's that it's also repeatable. And so it's not only, like athletes are measuring things. I think that's what observable, measurable, repeatable. I think I will get my gold star for CrossFit on that one. It's in the brain. But being able, to measure progress, but can we hit that same progress consistently over and over again? And the ability to show up. And so I think that percentage work is a really cool way to do that because the first week was like 85, 87%. And then it was 85, 87, 90, right? So you get to do the squats look the same week after week and so on and so forth. But the strength cycle has been fun for that. But then we get into, yeah, you mentioned like goals, right? And how do we coaches our goals for our athletes and kind of mesh them up with the athletes' goals for themselves. And we get to kind of establish that at the start of a cycle and say, hey, this is where we are, this is our baseline, and getting to kind of, yeah, dive further into that and let it unfold over 6 weeks. But getting to retest based on those goals allows us to, track some progress. So that's kind of where the cycles come in. But as much as they are, we're going to probably go a little different angle with the measurability of things. But the repeatability of week after week, can we show up? Can we do this again next week? Can we do it again the week after that? There's a lot of progress that we can see in that as well, and a lot of strength, maintenance and etc. So
I think a piece of that is with some of that is with the repeatability of it is we're building a foundation of strength that's there that's going to be there when you need it, and not just a good heavy lifting day where things, it is a level of like we are building the foundations of some of the stuff. The one person that I was referencing that's getting a little deeper in her squat and getting a little bit under some weight, we had a wonderful conversation after class around sort of some mindset stuff, which, is always a big piece of the gym. The gym psychology is always interesting, where we talked about, hadn't really recognized how much the programming is thought out and the intentionality of it. And we chatted a little bit about wanting to get her under some weight and why she hadn't really gotten under some weight, and her kind of anticipating the rest of the workout and sort of saving and conserving. And, the idea that this is well thought out, including all the rest of it, was eye opening for her to realize there was that much thought goes into some of it, which was interesting. Um, so that was a neat conversation, and she's, been fun to kind of get moving on some stuff. But we had for those of you that have listened to a couple of these, we have a second podcast. We had a conversation, and I think the last conversation we had on that podcast was about some of the cliches and how do you market something that, where you're saying the same thing everybody else is saying, and all the trainers are saying it and all the gyms are saying it and everybody trying to sell you fitness and new year, new you, or new you, whatever, get ready for summer, all the cliche stuff that everybody's doing. I think, and especially with CrossFit, because CrossFit is either absolutely terrible for you in some people's eyes because you're going to get hurt, is what they say, or it's a cult and everybody just loves it. So I think and I bring this up because I think the measurables are what can make the difference. I said, if we can have people in the gym that are enjoying it, first of all, they're having a good time. They're showing up for that. They're showing up for the community. They're putting in the work, but we can also, through some of the technology that we use and through the programming, demonstrate to them, like, yeah, you're getting stronger, and you had a good time doing it. Um, and you're getting more fit and you're getting healthier, all of those types of things. Having the ability to measure those things for them, whether or not they're really looking for that sort of stuff, I think is a helpful conversation that they can also lift their chests up about a little bit when they go out and get to talk about these things that they're doing, that, they're getting in the garden and it's going better. They're getting on their hikes and it's going better, and all the everyday stuff up and down the stairs at home. I think that is such a valuable piece of attracting people to what we're doing, because you can measure it, you can see the results. And I think that's one of the important things about it, because we can also go out there and say all the things everybody else is saying. But when the 84-year-old or the 77-year-old is having an easier time getting up and out of the furniture, or the grandmother who's having an easier time get off the floor, like those are all measurables too. And we put on our little nerdy hats over some of the movement and stuff and some of the technology. It's neat to be able to see that stuff and recognize it and have that to demonstrate for people, and new people that may be coming in, or, the folks that are here and try to figure out why they get up and do this thing every day. But I think that piece of it is valuable, especially when you are, like, you're going to CrossFit class, you're paying more than your gym membership. That's just a reality, But we try to lean on the side of this is small group personal training. Like, everything is individualized for you, because your numbers are different from the other person's numbers, and we need you to progress the same way we need to get the other person to progress. Progress looks different, so that's where the value in it is, and that's where, those sorts of things. I don't want to go down too far down
Yeah.
that road, but I think it's important.
Yeah. You're not, if for anybody, watching this or curious about CrossFit, maybe you've done CrossFit, right? Like, you're not, yeah, you're not paying for a workout and for fitness. You're paying for coaching. That's, what we're offering. And it is, the cliches that you mentioned are interesting because I think collectively, as we'll say, like, macro CrossFit culture, box to box, gym to gym, you do see a lot of the same language where, and I think it's a trap that we fall into, of trying to, like, help people feel safe about walking into a CrossFit gym, right? Like, the one that you'll hear across the board is everything can be scaled and modified to you. And it's like, but what does that mean, right? Like, you're saying it. And for us, it's not just writing up a couple scaling options on the board. For those that are listening that don't, scaling is just modifying. We kind of interchangeably use the word, but it's scaling and modifying is the thing that makes CrossFit more inclusive to more people. And I think sometimes, like, we as coaches come from it from a perspective to help people feel more included, more safe, more capable of taking on the workout. The piece that I think gets minimized a little bit or gets missed through a coaching lens that our doctor hats hold is that's not always what's happening in the voice inside the head of the person that you're coaching, which is a challenge, right? Like, you're presenting them with this thing that is, "Okay, we'll drop the numbers a little bit, go a little lighter, and it'll be great," right? Like, that is coming from a very positive, shape them up place. What may be happening in their head though is, "I'm not strong enough," or, "I'm not able to keep up," and so they're giving me different work, and I think that's an entirely different conversation that I'm sure we'll get into at some point, but it's helping people when help we help the athletes measure what they are doing in here, it also gives them a sense of responsibility, I think, and empowerment of owning their journey and where they're at, and they're like, "I did that today," right? Rather than, "Oh, go do this." It's, "This is what I did," and there's an embodiment there that happens, and we have we had a coaches meeting last weekend, and part of our conversation was, how do we help our athletes get and feel a little more independent in the gym, right? Because we probably take the coaching I don't wanna say that you can take coaching too far, but we probably don't release the hand that we're holding soon enough always, and that will, again, be different for each person, and it reaches a point where they are like, "So what am I supposed to be doing?" And it's, "You've been doing this for the last 6 to 8 weeks, like, you at this point," and how do we help them, like, know that we're here, but also start relying on themselves and trusting themselves and building that relationship, and it was a combination of that and helping them get better about tracking. We have an app that we use that for the most part, I think people use it, but there is a little bit of go through the motions of putting score in. I am grateful. I don't think that our community gets too hung up or wrapped up in like the leaderboard idea, right? I think it's definitely an area that comes up in a lot of affiliate owner conversations of making sure people aren't making choices to kind of, chase that leaderboard spot. We don't really talk about it. I think that helps, right? Like, we're not a gym where we put the names on the whiteboard. It's like you have your phone, put it in there. I don't even care if you check the private box so nobody can see it. Like, just put it in so that we have the data of where we are. But we do have a few people that just want to show up and they're like, and then not caring about what they're doing is like, I don't really care. It's I'm just here. I had a great time. I felt really good. I felt strong. That felt good. So, like, I'm happy with that. And it's like, cool. I still want you to put your scores in, right? Like, I still want you to put your weights in because it's also going to be really cool. So the member that you're talking about, her back squats last week, we got her heavy enough to when we squat on Friday, she's gonna graduate from a training bar of 15 pounds to she's gonna get to use the 35-pound, like, she's graduating, right? And so that's a cool, like, she doesn't realize just how cool that's gonna be on Friday, right? She gets to, like it's gonna be like, "Hey, go grab the other barbell." And they do, they perk up and they get excited and get giddy about it, and we can't if we're not connected to those things that we're doing in the gym, we don't get to celebrate those moments. So, I don't know if that was necessarily where I intended to go with that, but yeah, it's super important that we're tracking what we're doing and
Well, I think the empowerment piece is important. And you talk about hand holding. There's some hand holding, but there's also like I wouldn't make the argument held on too long because there's a level of that. But we have had a conversation this weekend about making sure that we're not losing sight of the fact that part of that empowerment is taking the responsibility for some of that stuff in the gym, and I think it's great. And then there's a level of that's well, and we'll use the idea of not using the app to track. I don't. I love the fact that we're not really a leaderboard culture. heard that from people when they come in is I'm not really here for the competition. Yeah, us either. However, you putting that score in there also, like that's how we hit the intended stimulus. Like if we don't know that number, then we don't know what 40% of that number is, or we don't know what 60% of that number is. And if we're just winging it, then we don't want to just wing the stimulus. Like our little, again, there's our little nerdy hats around it all. Want to make sure that like it's a prescription for the day. It is how do we do this and make sure like we're doing the prescribed work. And you made the joke this weekend that sometimes when we do that percentage work, we've made some adjustments for this reason. That when you come in and I see what's on your barbell and that's supposed to be 65%, and you do the math on that, I was like, you made the jokes, like, oh, I didn't realize you had a 700-pound back squat. Um, you don't. Like, there's a level of that. Like, how do we do better as coaches to make sure that we're holding people to the stimulus and also without shaking your finger at people? Like, I think the solution we come up with is a neat one because it'll help some of that. It'll help the coaches on the floor. But all of that stuff's important, and it's not important because anybody's trying to win a competition. It's important because there's a plan and there's intended stimulus as part of that plan. And how do we kind of walk you through this process and empower you through the process, make you feel good about the work that you're doing and help you reach those goals.
And in
Go
the
ahead.
spirit of more phrases that get tossed around a lot, I think the majority probably do a really good job with this, but the idea of so the competition that you're in is you versus you, right? Like the goal is for you to be in here and get 1% better, for to get one more rep to lift, I don't even care if it's one more pound, right? One rep, 1 second faster, it's always just one of the things I use a lot on the floor coaching is like, just do one more, right? Like, yeah, I know you've got 10 minutes left in the workout, right? But like, just do one more. And then when you do that one, do one more and then one more. And it's, I love the check in moments when we get to help them connect those pieces of like, like, this wasn't even yeah, it's hard, but this wasn't even within your wheelhouse 3 months ago, right? And so, as frustrating as this may feel today, or as heavy as this may feel today, do you know that, like, heavy 2 months ago was 45 pounds and now heavy is 65 pounds? We used to joke all the time, and we kinda carried that forward into our space, but, like, when we were first coming up through CrossFit, the better you get at CrossFit, the crappier it feels. Like it doesn't, and people who do CrossFit are going to understand that phrase, right? It's like, oh, like I want double unders. And it's like, cool. Do you know what double unders mean in a workout? And the first time you do them, you're like collectively both like proud of yourself for doing it, but you're like, man, I missed regular jump ropes because that was terrible. And so getting better means that it gets harder too. Yeah, the whole journey with CrossFit is just so interesting, right? And I think that is our goal as coaches is how do we, yeah, empower people to keep trying, right? We're empowering them to show up, to give effort, to try and embrace where they are, figure out where you want to head. And this is so much of this work overlaps with our other hats, and we're just using different tools to help our athletes get there. And yeah, if you're one of our athletes, track your stuff. Like, I think for the most part, like we're pretty good about it, but it's interesting. It also helps us. So like you talked about it helping us as coaches, there's also a piece of this that we're in constant reflection of as affiliate owners, right? So when you think like top down, right, we're on the floor as coaches and we're coaching our athletes, but there's also those first couple of weeks of this training cycle made me very nervous. And I was like, man, do we need to abort and figure, like kind of ease people back into this a little bit more in that first week? And then we did the second week and I was like, oh man, we had a lifting party on our schedule for it should have been a couple weeks ago. And we do a strong program where people can come in and test their back squat, deadlift, the CrossFit total, basically, or the weightlifting total. And I was, oh man, like we're gonna max the squat at the beginning of this. Our lifting party is not for like 4 or 5 weeks. Let's see where that is. And after that first week, I was like, we are not ready for a lifting party. Like, and a couple of our more experienced athletes, one in particular, he's been around it for a while. He was like, I think that's a good idea. I don't think we're, and I was like, you know, happy for the support in that decision. But dark help us. And then it was 2 weeks ago, things just shifted and people feel like they're handling it better. And him in particular, he was like, "Oh, like, these don't feel near as terrible as they did 2 weeks ago." I'm like, "You just had to give it time, right?" And there also would have been absolutely nothing wrong if the last few weeks were like, squats didn't feel great, right? And it's like, okay, this tells us where we are at as a community too. How do we make sure we're, you know, doing the best that we can for our athletes? So we started doing coach development and people are like, there's a lot happening in your brain. I'm like, yeah, all the time. Like everything is, very well thought out and very intentional from our end. And yeah, it's an interesting journey. So it's cool to get to a place where we're going to get to, test this again and help people kind of connect to, yeah, all the work they've been putting in.
Interesting. The thought just popped in my mind. One of the things we're really good about with our acupuncture, our doctor hats on, is the idea that especially with the way that we practice, our goal when we meet you is to sort of create and have a vision of who you are in health. I think that is also when you think about goals and stuff, and that for our athletes, that's really, it's not about pushing beyond where you're intended to be, but it is also holding a vision of how strong you are, where your mental space is, where's your mindset at, like, because it's not just physical. Sometimes it's like it is that those mental edges, and whether it's timidity or maybe some fear or whatever is going on. The idea of holding each of our athletes in that, and in a kind of that same sort of vision of health and strength and all of the things that it does certainly overlap with our work in the treatment rooms. But
So that's the language just to kind of pull this full circle back to, Max Day coming up on Friday. The language that I like to use a lot, in the gym as a coach is, look, you're showing up today to find your edge. And everyone's edge is going to look a little different. Some people are going to hit a technical edge where, we want people squatting to depth without pain, with ease, all of those things. And so we may in place right now. We have some athletes that are actively working towards their first full range of motion squat. And so, you know, that is that's a test, right? Is like, how is our mobility getting better? Are things getting looser? Do we feel more stable getting from top to bottom? And technical edges can also break down under load. So once we start adding weight, the beginning squats may look really beautiful and then they turn not so beautiful, you know, for the heavier weights or under new weight. That becomes a safety stop, right? And we expect form to break down to a certain degree, especially if there's new weights never touched before. We're not looking for, a new back squat to be picture perfect. The barbell, right? The air squat, the empty barbell, those early warm up sets, it should get, pretty kind of aggressive, less pretty as we get heavier. Um, and part of that is like movement patterns are not perfect in life, right? But do want them to be as safe as possible. And so where, you see it happening and you're just like, all right, like, let's try to fix that. And at the end of the day, like, this is a new number. That one got a little wiggly and wobbly. Let's call it there, right? This is going to give us something new you mentioned earlier, right? To build future work on. So we kind of, that's one of our edges that goes up on our board. The other one is the obvious one, right? Which is weight. It may not technique may not break down, but it may just be, I can't squat anymore. Like that's it. That's all I got. And that usually happens through failed lift or spotted lift, right? Like we may spot somebody through that. And then the third one, which we probably harp on the most, is mental edge. And those mental edges can look very different for each athlete too. Sometimes it is, I put the weight on the bar, I'm staring at it, pick it up. That scares me, right? It's like, okay. And we usually talk about it. And the step there is, right, like, let's get underneath it. Let's not remove it from the rack, but let's get underneath it, stand it up, see what it feels like. And if you pick it up and you're like, absolutely not, I do not want to this, set it down, we're done. Right. Um, and there's other mental edges of just not feeling super confident through the lifts. I had, one of our longstanding athletes recently who we got into some conversation through some heavy lifting and found out that there's always been an element of fear in her brain around heavy lifts. I had no idea. She is someone who comes across pretty confident in the room, moves a barbell really well, and learning one of the questions I like to ask my athletes is like, "What is going on in your head when you're lifting this?" And I usually get like one or two or three responses. I was like, "Absolutely nothing," because they're not thinking about anything, right? Like, I don't know. And for her, it was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want to get hurt." I'm like, I do not want that in your brain while you are lifting. Like, if we're like, I would rather you go into it with confidence, pick it up and half squat it, and us know that's an edge, right? Because you don't trust yourself to get low enough. That's still in my brain, still a mental edge more than it is a physical one if you have the ability to squat to depth. And at the same time, like you are the one that's in charge of this weight and doing it. Like, I need you to show it who's boss, or we need to like that is the work, right? Like that's the work that we need to do. And so we talk about it a lot leading up to backstage. They usually do a video, kind of some of this flavor, right? But it also changes that perspective, to your point earlier, that it's not always about the weight. And I think people hit more mental edges than they do physical ones than we may give credit for sometimes because there's a population that is just very used to powering through. And the fitness world really plays into that, right? It's like, oh, like no pain, no gain, suck it up, buttercup, whatever that may be. And so, and they've not, haven't necessarily adopted that in the CrossFit space. Maybe they have, but it's like, I just have to prove to myself that I can do this. And it's like, and what if we take different perspectives on that? So we group that into our edges of all of those things. Why are you laughing at me? Is this how I ended up talking 400 minutes?
Probably.
Okay.
No, I'm just thinking about, I think some of the, yeah, we're definitely not a no pain, no gain culture here. Like that's not something we even want to kind of creep its way in. But I think some of the confidence stuff, I think we do a good job. And I think even we're going to round it
I
up.
think we do a good job on the confidence thing. We'll
Yeah.
go out
With the cliches, I think are said enough in most boxes, or at least it seems like they're said enough in most boxes that even when somebody expresses a lack of confidence or fear or whatever that may be, we pull out the cliche card and be like, "Oh no, well, yeah." So I think a lot of that stuff happens internally, especially again thinking about their doctor's hats. There's a level of that. There's a lot in our culture where people are walking around with low self-esteem, thinking they're not enough, those types of things. And that stuff certainly shows up in the gym. And if you're not verbalizing it, my mom, your grandmother ended up,
Yeah.
she absolutely loved CrossFit when she was doing it. But she loved it so much that she went home and practiced it because she wanted to get better because she wanted to keep up with class. She kept up with class just fine. And it was going home and practicing it and creating overwork is where she injured herself. And it was enough of an injury that she never did it again. I it was I'm gonna say this, Mom, I love you. And this is probably the happiest I ever saw you. Like when you were doing that, you felt good, you were moving your body, You just I have a picture of you from last year, that Murph, the one year you did it. So you're just sitting there glowing and grinning. And I don't hate that you're not doing CrossFit anymore. I hate that you think that you can't do it. Cultures and Cameron was fantastic. It wasn't the box at all. The coaching was phenomenal there. It was a level of confidence and a level of I need to keep up that was happening internally inside her head that you also recognize in some of the other athletes in the gyms that I have to do more. I have to try this. I have to. And no, you don't. This is about you versus you. The idea, this popped in my head when you were talking. I had a lot of time to think while you were chatting.
Listen.
I think the way we get from timidity, showing up timid in the gym, to confidence, the bridge in that is trust, and I think that's our responsibility as coaches to nurture that, so that for that person who's has a little fear getting under the bar, that I don't want you to get under the bar fearful either, but I also am not going to put you under the bar if I don't think you can manage the load. And how do we keep you safe so that when you do finally work up the courage to get under that load and you get to depth and you press it and you crush it, like that's super exciting. But I think one of the things about the way we're approaching this is it's getting built, that I'm not going to push you beyond where you want to go. And that will allow you to hopefully be less timid in certain situations and gain some confidence. And I think a lot of that falls on culture of the gym, the culture of the coaches, the expectations of, as us having a coaching staff is what we expect from coaches and how we need them to show up. And it's not just about knowing all the tricks. It's not just knowing the Burgeoner warm-ups. It doesn't make you the greatest coach in the world. Like we can pull out all the tricks and all the things. And yes, all that stuff is valuable, but it's also about knowing who your athletes are in the gym and what their edges are and what they know their edges are. And also the mental edges are probably the hardest ones to find because they don't always openly share them. But if you don't connect with and talk to and communicate with, and even then they may not share, but we're not trying to push anybody beyond their limits. We're just really trying to get them. Like from timid to confidence. The trust has to be there. It's been neat to sort of feel that happening for some of the athletes in the
Brain
gym.
exploded with like
I
4 or
bet.
5 things you said. No, I think one aspect of that, and I will say, like, just as a general, like, any coach listening to this, right, is like you saying it to your athlete is not enough. Like you telling them that they can do it, it doesn't, it one time, right? It doesn't integrate that way. Yeah.
Not about the hype song.
Yeah. And I wish it was that easy. If it was that easy, we would for other hats. Like we wouldn't have that job. Right. Like, and that doesn't mean that you don't say it because it's not going to make an impact. The recognition in that is you may have to say it to some people 500 times before they hear it once. Like they didn't hear it the first 499 times you said it. It doesn't mean that you didn't say it, but the first time they hear it, that's still only one rep in their brain. And that is And you don't know when they picked it up, right? You don't know when they heard it for the first time. You don't know if you heard it for the first time and then they actually believed you, right? Because like, there's also an element of that they heard you say it and they're like, "Yeah, I know, I'm strong, confident, all the things," right? Like, but until it integrates and until they let that in to themselves and believe it for themselves, it doesn't matter. And that doesn't mean that we don't stop telling them, we don't stop trying. We have one of the things that we do sometimes we're trying to like guide our athletes' eyes somewhere is instead of just being like, hey, look forward, as I go grab one of our little whiteboards and I write them a little note on it, and then I stick the board like where they need it. So if you need their eyes out front on a deadlift, right? Like you drop it at that however many inches out in front of them and then they see it. But I always write them a little note instead of just being like, "Hey, look here." And it's always like, "Hi," or "You're doing great." And we had one of our athletes we've done that with a couple times, and one of the more recent times that we did it, she pulled me aside after class and she was like, that was like she didn't care. It wasn't the coaching, it wasn't the event or the workout. It was like in the middle of it, she needed to know that she was doing great, right? Like that worked for her, right? That same phrase won't work for somebody else. Sometimes it's just like, hi, or a little smiley face or whatever that may be. But I think sometimes we think just because we say it that it's going in, and that i- is not necessarily the case. And that's hard. And that is the work. I think one of the other things that I know that I tell people when we're starting to lift or we're starting to move, and this for me, I don't know that I've ever shared this with anyone, but when one of the things that I always tell athletes when we're coaching is like, look, if I'm not correcting you, assume you're doing it right. In order to do that, you have to know that your coaching is at a level that they can believe that phrase, right? Like we have to be coaching so much and so diligently, correcting when we see things are wrong, that they can start to integrate that. And if we're just facilitating a class, if we're just turning on the clock and handing out praise, right? I was like, "Oh, good job. Like, you're doing great." And we're doing all these things, and they may be, right? But when the person is in the back of the class, "Oh, this feels really awkward. I don't think I'm gonna do this right, or I think I'm gonna hurt myself." Like, when you see those things go off, like, part of that coaching in that moment was like, "Look, it looks great. Like, you're moving great. If I'm not saying anything, assume you're doing it right." That also means that every time we see something going wrong, we need to be correcting them because otherwise that you talk about trust, right? That is one way. And this is probably gonna come across a little arrogant and a little full of myself, but I believe enough in what I bring to the table as a coach that I can say that to someone and know that if and when I say that, the coaching that we're offering is behind that and that they're not gonna hurt themselves, right, if I turn my back and whatever that is. So that's one step that I've always kind of used to help people integrate into that. Because in the middle of a workout, right, like the movement's going, you got half the room dropping barbells, the other half not dropping barbells, and they're like, "Where am I supposed to be? What's the next movement? What round am I on?" Right? Like, all of these things are happening at once. And you do probably have somebody in the room that is like, overwhelmed, right? Overwhelmed by noise, movement, the speed at which the workout's moving. And you've probably got somebody in the room that's like, this doesn't feel right. Just because it doesn't feel doesn't mean it's wrong. And it doesn't mean that you're doing anything unsafe. So just keep moving, get the reps in. Like you're good. If it looks too ugly, I'm gonna cause some coaching we did recently. Like, hey, on some days where we're testing new weight, anybody who's been coached knows that I'll tell you if if you're moving something and things get weird and ugly, I will take weight off the bar. I will never be the coach. I say never because we did it last week where I brought people new kettlebells to hold. But we'll never bring you more weight in a workout, right? But we'll absolutely strip it off in the middle if things are getting weird. And I tell them like, you can be mad, but I'd rather you be mad, healthy, and not hurt than just sitting off to the side internally cringing, right? Because the 8-minute workout's not the time to necessarily like pull you off to the side and give you a lecture on what we need to do to fix form. So yeah, I had like 3 other things that went off my brain. Now they're all
You don't
gone.
have time. There's a the one thing we do need a talking stick, that is for sure.
Listen, we also said that we would talk and just see where it goes, and we'd split it into
Well,
multiple
here we
episodes if we needed to.
go.
So
The one thing I want to throw this out there, the idea of building trust with your athletes. And I think it just, I don't know if it's ever been said. I've never heard it said. I've heard every single person in the world ever talk about coaching and CrossFit. But I think one thing we're really good about, or I think in order to establish that, it's not about It's about coaching with your heart. And how do you connect with your athletes, kind of understand their goals, have visions of who they are in health, and they trust that you're sort of guiding them there. I think that's how you establish the trust because they know you're there for them. And I think that's our in-house refined coaching program started with a certain number of athletes who wanted to be coaches, and it ended with a certain number of athletes who made it through the program. And that was intentional because some of the ask is bigger than just understanding what the points of performance are. Um, if you're creating that culture in the space, then people feel safer. They still have their stuff, but they feel safer. And I think that develops trust. And if I develop trust, we can get to the confidence. And, we'll get you there through the process of it all. But it's bigger than barbells. It's bigger than the numbers on the leaderboard. It's about people that are trying to get stronger and live healthier and age well and move better and all of that stuff so that they can enjoy their life because CrossFit's not intended to be their life.
I don't want to accidentally ramble for like another 15 minutes, but I remember one of my other, and it's in relation to what you just said, right? Like we, uh, what kind of prompted some of that conversation was not realizing what's going on inside with people. And like you said, they may not ever tell you. Most people aren't going to walk up to you and like, hey, like I'm not very confident. I just wanted you to know that. Okay, let's go lift some weights, right? Like it's not, they're not putting that out there in that way. The other layer to that, as we connect and listen to our athletes and understand what is happening, we have to take that next step and understand why. And that is the RX plus version of coaching, right? Like you just knowing that they don't have a lot of confidence doing XYZ is a great first step. And because we can do a lot with that, right? Like we can help them build confidence. You talked about trust, all of those things. When you get an opportunity, and it doesn't have to be therapy, right? Like this, no, I know this conversation makes it sound like we're having therapy with all of our members, and we're not, right? And some of this, we have different tools to pull that out quickly or to connect with those areas quickly because it's the work that we've done for the last decade. And so it's a skill that we have that we've developed over the years that maybe didn't come from CrossFit but it is in there. But if you really want to help, you've got to know why. You got to know why it happened. Some people are going to want to tell you, some people are not. Is the confidence, and it can be as simple like, have you always been that way? Right? Like, it doesn't have to be like the top moment that you like, what was the story that like you started feeling less confident? It's, have you always been that way? Or is that just like, is that a more recent? And they'll tell you, like, most of the time, they'll be like, oh no, like I've heard my whole life that I'm not good enough. And, you be prepared. If you ask the question, you have to be prepared for people to answer you. Some people may give you more of a life story. Other people may just be like, I don't know, I'm just don't feel that confident and then move on, right? You don't have to force it out of them. But that's the next layer of that with people and is the thing that takes it forward, and y you can't as a coach, like, you can't coach people to care. That has to come from us. There might be other coaches watching this be like, "I have 400 members in my box. There's like, I can't possibly learn all their life stories." And I would challenge you to say that it would make you a better coach and affiliate owner if you would try, right? Because it matters. It matters to the people that you ask, and you don't have to interview them all. And like I said, it doesn't have to be therapy, but it's a piece that separates, and none of that's got to come from you. There's no, oh, let's do it. There's no, I was gonna say, there's no podcast. We're telling you to do it, right? There's now a podcast telling you to do it. But there's so many layers to that. It was part of what inspired us to get on here and press record. I recognize that, compared to our shenanigans, this one's probably a little clunkier. So if you made it all the way to the end of this episode, hopefully it smoothed out, right? Like we started in one place and we're ending somewhere. And then I don't know that we knew this conversation was going today. But
So
yeah, it's
there's a the refining the 33 is not going to be all CrossFit all the time. I do think as we layer in this piece of it, though, and we talk about this, there's lessons in this that align with the message that we're trying to get through with refining the 33. And maybe you're not a CrossFit coach. Maybe you don't even do CrossFit. And this is certainly not an ad for you to go out and find your CrossFit gym because they're not all created equal. But it is about kind of creating expectations of what you should be looking for when you find your people or the people that you want to, this is, if you're an athlete, this is how your coaches should be leading you. If you're a coach, then in our opinion, this is a nice way to do it. Um, and if you're neither of those things, I think the message for you is making sure that you show up, stay positive, and you're leading with your heart. And the refining the 33 is not an alpha thing. It's just be a good person, lead with your heart, have compassion, connect with people deeper than just the surface level, and try to understand and kind of see what people are going through. That's true whether you're in the gym. That's true whether you're out, whether you're standing in line at a coffee shop or you're sitting in a stoplight somewhere having some road rage because your traffic's thicker than our traffic. But it is about understanding people and being a good human. So, yeah, circle that back a little bit.
don't be a
And mom, it's okay that you're not doing CrossFit. Active, happy early Mother's Day. So, anyway, love you. And so, yeah, lots to hash out there. And we'll see where this goes.
cool. Good talk.
Good talk.